Falafel is one of those recipes that sounds as exotic as it tastes. Maybe you've enjoyed falafel tucked into some pita bread or on its own drizzled with some tantalizing tahini sauce. Falafel is one of those foods that's fun to order out, but the thought of making it at home may seem daunting. Well, I've got good news. It's easier than you think, especially my recipe in which we make it in one of these. Yes, today we are going to turn the air fryer into a falafel making machine. Hello and welcome to I Want to Cook. My name is Chef Matt and this channel is all about helping you be a better cook. And yes, today we are making air fryer falafel, which may lead you to your first question, what is falafel? So falafel is a famous Middle Eastern dish that is traditionally made of ground up chickpeas or fava beans, along with aromatics and herbs like parsley, onions, garlic, and some spices like coriander and cumin. The mixture is then formed into balls or patties and then cooked. Ideally, you want it to have a nice crispy exterior and a soft interior. Falafel is great in a lot of ways, but it's also great for your budget. This is a very cheap dish to make and it's also nutrient rich. And if you are vegan or gluten-free, well, good news, it's both. Now, as I mentioned, falafel's primary ingredient is either going to be chickpeas or fava beans. For this version, we are going to use chickpeas, which, not to confuse you even more, but chickpeas are also known as garbanzo beans. So either of those that you find in the store are going to work. They're the same thing. Chickpeas equal garbanzo beans. Now, falafel is easy to make and it doesn't take long, usually less than 30 minutes, but it does require some planning. That's because for the chickpeas you want to use, or the garbanzo beans, again, they're the same, you don't want to use canned. So don't use these to make falafel. The texture isn't right. So that means that you're going to need to use these dried beans, these dried garbanzo beans that you buy in the store. And what you'll need to do is put them in a big pot of water and soak them overnight. You want to soak these for about 18 to 24 hours to get them nice and puffed up, nice and soaked. You want them to absorb all that water. But the good news is you don't need to cook those once they are done. By cooking them in the air fryer, you are cooking them. So all you have to do is soak them and then they will be ready to use for this recipe. Now, falafel is usually made by deep frying those balls or patty in oil. Now, I have made it this way and it can be really, really good. You get that nice crispy exterior, but honestly, that's kind of a hassle. If you're kind of a newbie to deep frying, well, you kind of have to know what you're doing, otherwise things can fall apart, and just getting all the oil out, well, again, it can be a little bit of a hassle. You can also make these in an oven, and I've done it that way too, but I've found that kind of the best of both worlds is using this air fryer because you get better crispness and, well, it's just easy. Okay, so let's put it all together, and before we get out the air fryer, we're using another appliance, a food processor. I'm using my old vintage thrift store find, this Hamilton Beach. I love this thing, it's a tank. So here's how to put this all together. We have rinsed our chickpeas, they've dried now, and we are gonna use about, let's say, a cup. And again, these are just those soaked chickpeas. So we're gonna put those right into the food processor. I'm also going to use about half an onion and 2 to 3 cloves of garlic. This is just a white onion that I've cut up. We'll put that in there. We're also going to use some flat leaf Italian parsley. Just put that in there. Again, we're going to use about a cup of that. You don't need to worry about exact ratios on this. Okay, now we are going to add a few spices. That's really going to give it its nice punch. And we are going to begin with cumin. Cumin is, I love cumin. Maybe you've had this in some refried beans. It's just got this nice kind of spice and warmth to it. So we're going to use a couple teaspoons of cumin, just kind of put it in there. And we're also going to use coriander. We're going to use a couple teaspoons of this as well. Just put it in there. We're going to use about a teaspoon of kosher salt, a little bit of cracked black pepper, And for a little punch, we're gonna use some cayenne pepper. If you don't like things spicy, you don't have to add this. You can add maybe a half a teaspoon, or if you're like me and you like the spice, you can add a little bit more. So those are our main ingredients. We're also gonna add a little bit of olive oil here. I'm just gonna drizzle this in. This is gonna help bind everything. Now, I know that some recipes call for adding some flour or adding some baking powder to give it more fluffiness. I found that this mixture doesn't need it, but by all means, if you wanna try that, you can. Okay, we have everything in our food processor, so we are just gonna pulse this until it is nice and ground up. So here we go. Okay, and here's the mixture. This is kind of the consistency you want. Again, it doesn't have to be super fine, but you do want it nice and ground up. Now we are going to form it into small balls and then put it in the air fryer. Okay, so here we go. I like to use an ice cream scoop for this, and we are just gonna make little balls. If you've ever made like meatballs, it's the same process. We just want to get these kind of nice and packed together, and then you get these cute little balls, and we are just gonna place them in the air fryer. And we are just gonna do this until we have, well, my air fryer is a little bit small and only makes maybe half a dozen or so. If you have a larger air fryer, you can obviously fit more, but this is gonna make, I think, about 6 to 9, kind of depending on the size of the balls. So we're just gonna put these together, and you wanna make sure to give them some space. So here we go. And here's what it looks like when it's put together. See, we have these little balls. There's 7 that I fit in my air fryer. And now one more thing we're gonna do before we actually start frying them is we are gonna drizzle them with just a little bit of olive oil. That's gonna help with the browning. Now we air fry. So for my model, I like to do these for 15 minutes or so at about 400 degrees. Of course, you know, always monitor it as it gets toward the end, make sure nothing's burning. But for this, I found that 400 degrees, 15 minutes works out just about perfectly. So let's fry things up. While the falafel is cooking, I'm gonna whip up a quick tahini sauce. Also in another thrift store food processor, I found this little guy for $5 the other day, and it's great for whipping up little sauces like tahini. So let's do that now. Okay, you want to monitor these toward the end, and that's exactly what I've been doing, and boy, do they look good. So you ready to see them? All right, here we go. Air fryer falafel. Take a look at that. Doesn't that look fantastic? I mean, we didn't have to do any deep frying. We didn't have to get out a bunch of oil, and yet look at these guys. Boy, I cannot wait to dive into them. And here we are. We have our air fryer falafel with this homemade tahini sauce. This took, what, like 20 minutes to make? Fantastic. Crispy on the outside, nice and soft within. As you can see, you can make perfect falafel in an air fryer. So there you go, with just a few simple ingredients, a food processor, and most importantly, an air fryer, you can make falafel anytime. I hope you do with this recipe. And by the way, if you have any of those leftover chickpeas that you soaked, well, you can crisp those up and get crispy chickpeas in one of these too. I made a whole video on that, and I'll put a link to that one in the description below. Okay, trivia time. Last week I asked you to identify this crazy device and several of you got it right. It is indeed a watermelon slicer. It works kind of like a giant apple core. You cut the watermelon so that it lays flat and you just push this thing down and well, you get equal slices of delicious watermelon. For this week's kitchen trivia, we are headed back to the produce aisle, and who is going to be able to identify this crazy type of pepper? Boy, this shriveled thing, it looks kind of like E.T.'s finger. If you know what this is or have a guess, put it in the comments below and I will let you know the correct answer in the next video. As always, thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Until next time, I hope you want to cook.